This primeval concept was designed in antiquity for the express purpose of regeneration, resurrection, and apotheosis, for deity incarnation from the underworld to the earth's surface through the combination of two respective figures which are secrets among the highest occult orders today, but here it is: the dome, the ancient structural representation of the womb of Isis, and the obelisk, the ancient representation of the erect male phallus of Osiris. This original layout of the dome and obelisk, modeled in antiquity, exists today on the grandest scale. I don't have my glasses on. I don't even see what it says.
15 minutes.
Must say, what, 15 minutes? Whoo! Somehow I bought another 5. Or maybe 10, I don't know. The grandest scale, it exists at the heart of the capital of the most powerful government on earth, the United States of America, as well as in the heart of the most powerful church on earth, the Vatican. And by the way, I am not here taking any kind of a shot at Catholics. I'm talking about governments and institutions, religious and non-religious, and what they often do in our name like they're doing now doesn't necessarily represent me and you. And may God give us a movement across this country that'll make that fact turn into tangible results so that we can reclaim what we are quick to lose if we don't. But this pattern ought to be considered, and here's why. If you're like me and you put stock in the Bible, Apostle Paul, John in the book of Apocalypse, the pattern is there that the end times would see a marriage between the political and religious institutions. The political, as in the authority of the Antichrist, and the religious institutions as in the authority of the false prophet. And that these would happen at the return of this character, known in the Bible as Antichrist, of course, in just 2 places where I just showed you, also called Apollo, which is the same deity that's encoded upon your great seal as returning. And by the way, at a particular moment in time, you'll have to read my book to know why I say that. I'm not a date setter, but I can tell you some things that the occultists believe. It therefore behooves open-minded people to consider this grand scale, this pattern, this prophecy in stone that exists in Washington, D.C. and at the Vatican, because it defines the spiritual energy that is either being knowingly or unknowingly invoked in both of those locations. Did you know that the capital of the United States is often called the Mirror Vatican? And that's because of the strong similarity between some of its primary buildings and streets. Well, that's no accident. In fact, the founding fathers first called the capital city of the United States Rome. But the parallelism between Washington and the Vatican is no more clearly illustrated anywhere else other than by the Capitol dome facing the obelisk known as the Washington Monument, and in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican by a similar dome facing a familiar obelisk, both of which were, according to their own official records, fashioned after the Roman Pantheon, the domed rotunda dedicated to all pagan gods. Now this pattern, a dome temple facing an obelisk, this is an ancient alchemical blueprint that was used by the highest in history, the highest levels of the occult order, for one purpose: to generate the resurrection of the god into the personage or the leader of that country or government represented by that individual. Let me do this real quick. For those who may not know it, the U.S. Capitol building, let's see if you knew this, in Washington, D.C., is historically based on a pagan Masonic temple theme. Did you know that? Thomas Jefferson, who shepherded the Roman Pantheon design, wrote to the Capitol's architect, Benjamin Latrobe, defining it as, quote, the first temple dedicated to establishing with Athenian taste the course of a nation looking far beyond the range of Athenian destinies. The Athenian Empire, of course, was first known as Ossyria, the Empire of Osiris. In 1833, Massachusetts Representative Rufus Coyote agreed, saying, "We have built no temples but the Capitol." Now, why would that be true? Why would the builders have been referring to our Capitol dome as a temple? Well, in 1793, when the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol building was laid by George Washington in full Masonic garb and ritual, Maryland Grandmaster Joseph Clark was there that day as Grandmaster pro tempore. And to cannon fire, here is what he said, both before and after cannon fire, he proclaimed this loudly: "I have every hope that the grand work we have done today will be handed down to as late posterity as the like work of that ever memorable temple to our order, erected by our Grand Master Solomon. The work we have done today, laying the cornerstone of this designed magnificent temple, the capital of our states, by the virtuous achievements of our most illustrious brother, George Washington," end quote. So in other words, ladies and gentlemen, master Freemasons, including George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Pierre Elephant, they designed and dedicated the Capitol building of the United States to be a temple of pagan spiritual energy, modeled after their belief systems based on Isis, Osiris, and Harem-Abib. Now, to understand the significance behind those statements and what it might mean for the future of the world, you have to comprehend how these apparati, the dome and the obelisk facing it, facilitate important archaic and modern protocols for invigorating prophetic supernatural alchemy. Did you follow that? Another 10 minutes. In ancient times, the obelisk was the representation of the missing male organ of Osiris, who was killed by his either brother Set, and chopped into 14 pieces. All those parts were thrown into the Nile River, where they floated down the Nile River into Byblos. And 13 of those pieces became hung up on the limbs of a tamarisk tree, where Isis found them and started putting them all back together, right? Talk about your super glue. But she wasn't able to find his male organ, which tradition says was swallowed by a fish. Plutarch says it was swallowed by a crocodile. Something swallowed it and it was in the water. But Isis replaced the missing organ with an obelisk and magically impregnated herself with Horus, which is the resurrected Osiris. Well, anyway, that legend is central to Freemasonic belief. Basically, Freemasonic belief is based on that legend. And that legend also formed the core of Egyptian cosmology and was venerated on the most imposing scale all throughout ancient Egypt by giant, towering obelisks, including at Karnak, at the greatest of all of their edifices, the obelisk and dome, as imitations of the deity's male and female reproductive organs, could, through government representation, invoke into existence the being or beings symbolized by them. In my 25 years of pastoring, by the way, one of my specialties was, in fact, I served for 3 years as an exorcist. And to do that required a great deal of study in fields of spiritual warfare, occultism, that sort of thing. And I can tell you there is a precedent for when nations allow their governments to do particular things. They can loose and unloose supernatural realities. If people tolerate it, if they go along with it, if they allow it to happen, your angel in the whirlwind literally can be released and set in motion chaos across the world. These are real powers. Well, the dome and obelisk were very much a part of how the deity would be incarnated in the leader of that capital. I'm trying to figure out here, as I'm standing here, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to wind this down in the next 5 minutes.